And now, it's the Finding Your Spine podcast with host Chase Spears.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Finding Your Spine. Here on the show today, we have Andrew Crapuchettes, the founder and visionary behind RedBalloon. This is a man whose mission absolutely is one that just inspires me. The whole purpose of this podcast is to call men and women of moral principle to step out of the shadows and into boldly living and leading for the truth. And I know that is absolutely what you are all about at RedBalloon. And I'm just so stinking thrilled that you're here today. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Chase, thanks so much for having me. I love to talk to like-minded people and hopefully give people some stories that'll give them some courage in their specific situation. So thank you for having me.
You betcha. Well, I'll tell you what, you encouraged me in 2022. I was still in the Army at that point in time, and I can remember, I don't remember the date. If I look it up on the show schedule, I can probably identify it. But I remember where I was on Fort Leavenworth. I was on the north side of the headquarters building, driving around to get out the back gate to go home one day. I was frustrated. I was discouraged. And I'm listening to the Aaron Wren podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And there's this guy on it named Andrew talking about this new job board that he's building to actually connect sane people with sane organizations. And like for the rest of that drive home, I was like, there's hope.
Well, good, and it's so funny. And Aaron's a good friend, good guy. And also we share a barber, a couple of bald guys, but yeah, and I think that's actually that's really encouraging to me to hear, A, and B, I think it is a lesson for everyone, right? Because you never know when you take a bold stand, who's going to hear that, who's going to be encouraged by it, who's going to gain courage because you were courageous. And I had no idea, and we'd never met at the time, but praise the Lord, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I've been following your work ever since, man, and it's just a joy to watch out here. I keep joking with my family, like someday I may just say, we're moving to Moscow. It seems like there's a great energy out there. I'm increasingly, the more I learn about the team out there, it's a lot of fun. But anyways, Before we jump in, let me kind of share a little bit of your background with our listeners, and then we'll jump into what I know is going to be a really exciting chat here. Andrew Crapuchettes is a pioneer in the labor market data and analytics industry and is probably best known for being the visionary and founder of RedBalloon, which we're going to talk about a lot. You began your career as a young Silicon Valley entrepreneur, building business process automation, selling 3D modeling software, and you even took that into the classroom and taught graduate coursework on that kind of stuff, as I recall.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was, and again, I won't go into too much detail unless you really want it. But growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area was a real blessing. And I got to work at a .com early on. I never went to college. I realized that my friends were paying money to get education, and I was getting paid to get education in the workplace. And so I stuck with it, and it was kind of a cool experience because I turned 21 on an expense account. I got to travel the world, but at the ripe old age of 22, I got burned out on working 100-hour weeks, didn't even have a life at all, and I wanted to be with a good church community, so that's why I moved up to Idaho.
Well, now I'm kind of curious. You mentioned when you were 22. I'm not trying to age you, but around what time was that?
So that would have been right around year 2000. So I am 48 now, It was a wonderful experience working in the .com world. And basically, I was part of a business that was a successful business. We ended up getting $32 million of VC capital. And this is, 25 years ago when $32 million actually meant more than it does today. And it was a lot of money. And we used that capital to take a business that was otherwise successful and turn it into this steroid growth kind of business. And I wasn't on the executive team. I wasn't making the decisions, but I did get a front row seat to what venture capital dollars do to an otherwise successful business. And also when a business runs after a trend, and the trend was we're all going to get rich as a .com IPO. and we're all going to be worth millions and millions of dollars, and that's way more important than anything else than we're doing. And we basically went from making a couple $1,000,000 a year to losing $8 million a year. And while that was really fun, and I played some really nice rounds of golf in Tokyo and around the world, it really was not a good business plan. So anyway, it was really cool to be able to experience that, to be able to be part of that, to be able to watch that, but then to not do that as I came up to Idaho and starting my own businesses.
And then in 2001, you started another company called MC, right? Which later
That's right.
became LightCast. And that started off really small, and you grew that into a rather large organization as well.
That's right. Basically, and the thesis behind that business was, and this is, kind of connects actually to RedBalloon. I have always been fascinated with jobs and prosperity because a job is such a defining feature of who a person is. If you have a job that is a good fit for what you do, or what you love to do, and it's a good fit for what you're good at, and it happens to be something that employers will pay you for, then you're going to have a joyful and fulfilled life. And there's always parts of every job that are painful or hard to do, or that's just the curse of Adam. That's just the way it is. But if you can find the right job that helps you kind of connect with who you are, then you're going to, again, have a more fulfilled career. You're going to be able to have a more prosperous life. You might be able to earn enough money to, go on vacations, go out to dinner. If your spouse wants to stay home with the kids, you would be able to afford to do that if you have a high-paying job. And so I moved up to Idaho, and I grew up in this Bay Area world where everybody was making all this money, and there were no good jobs in Idaho. So I thought, okay, so how do we create jobs in our community? And how do I build a business that also generates that kind of prosperity for people all around the country? So we started with labor market data. And I know that sounds like, economics is the dismal science. Who cares about labor market data anyway? But what we were doing was we were saying, access to good decision-ready information at the point of decision is always a way to make better decisions. And you have a lot of information on your phone, even though we didn't really have smartphones at that time, but in your web browser, you have a lot of information on your phone on where you should go to dinner tonight, where you should go on vacation, whether you can get a mortgage for your house. But there's not a lot of good information on some of the biggest decisions of your life, like where you should go to college, what classes you should take, what field of study should you go into. If you already have a job, should you ask for a raise? If you want to add to your skill set, if you think of your career as a basket of skills and competencies, what skills and competencies should you add to generate the most positive income for you in the future? And there really wasn't good information for that. And so that's really what we attacked, is how do we create labor market data at scale that will allow people to make better decisions? We started by selling to community colleges, which is a hard place to start because they don't have a lot of budget, but it was an opportunity to learn a lot and start to help people who maybe didn't have the parental backing that someone going to Harvard or Yale does. And these people don't understand the career world. And in fact, I remember working with a kid at a community college, and he was like, we were going through something. He's like, is graphic design actually like a career? I'm like, yeah, it is. He's like, I didn't know that. I just thought that was like a fun thing I like to do. And that's the kind of information that, if you grow up in a family with parents who can talk to you, give you input, you're going to know those things. But when you maybe aren't in that environment, you're not in that situation, you don't know that stuff. So we thought, okay, how do we create labor market data at scale to help people make better decisions? And that's what MZ did. And our first business goal was 50 people earning over $50,000 a year in Moscow, Idaho, because we thought that would move the needle on this town. And to do that, we're going to have to generate the revenue necessary to get there. And so there you go. We built this business. It was fun. We ended up selling it 4 different times, which is maybe another story altogether. And built it to I think it's about $150 million a year business right now, selling labor market data, of all things, to businesses, universities, community colleges, and anybody else who needs it.
Man, and then so you built that, and like labor is where you're at. And then
Yes.
Now in 2021, you found an entirely new company, RedBalloon.
Yes.
And that's of course where I first heard about you, first learned about you, and was so excited about it. And you guys have had some pretty remarkable growth. I mean, you're as far as I know, you're pretty much like the organization of record for trying to connect, conservative-minded people with basic constitutional values, with
That's right.
organizations that value that, instead of them having to go out and do the best they can to eke out a living in organizations where they're viewed with kind of a hostile eye.
That's right. That's right. And RedBalloon is an outgrowth of my story. So back to MZ, which is now called LightCast. We got to 2020. The business is growing 25% a year with a 40% margin. So, but I'd sold it so many times, I had like 2% ownership left. So I didn't have enough to really have a real stake to be able to push back. And we were owned by what was before a great organization, but I feel like 2020 is the year the world lost their mind, and my board lost their mind along with it. So my board came to me and said, look, you are an unapologetic conservative Christian CEO, and that's just not the direction we want. So either you can dial down who you are and how you act, and basically leave your faith in on the weekends, or we're going to have to go a different direction for a CEO. At this time, the company is going great. I didn't have customers complaining. I didn't have employees complaining. And I was an unapologetic conservative CEO. But the board thought that the year's 2020, and that is out of vogue, and therefore you need to dial down who you are, or you're going to need to lose your job. Obviously, I've talked to a lot of lawyers who are like, they're not allowed to do that. That is true. But I also didn't want to, leave a smoking crater of a business, because we had hundreds of employees here in Moscow working for that business, and they were supporting their families. Back to that prosperity thesis that we were talking about earlier, I had a lot of six-figure jobs that we had created in this little town of Moscow, Idaho, and I knew that if I went into a prolonged battle with the board, it probably would end badly for everybody. So, okay, fine, not worth doing. I'm just going to focus on, moving on, leaving things better than I found them, and leaving the business. But so when I leave that business, and this is in May of 2021, I'm like, okay, so I just had to make kind of an important decision between my job and my values. And I feel like we're in an environment in America right now where that's going to be a decision that's going to be fairly common for people all over this country. And if you are forced with that decision, particularly as a conservative or a Christian, that is a really hard decision. And you think, well, of course I would make the right decision. I would stick with my values and I would lose my job. But losing your job also means, not feeding your kids, not paying your mortgage, not being the type of person that you don't want to be worse than an infidel. So you want to be someone who supports your family and works hard. And little compromises here and there are probably not going to make that much of a difference. Well, all those little compromises turn into a bigger deal. And then you have kind of lost who you are. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to start a way for people to connect who care about America, who care about meritocracy, who think this DEI thing is ridiculous, and instead focus on what made America great in the first place: hard work, meritocracy, etc. Right? So we do that. And I kind of throw this job board out there. I'm like, I hope people can find each other. Technology's pretty easy for me, so I'm going to create this job board. I'll be done. And then the vaccine mandate came around. And my take was, look, if you want to get a vaccine, you're an adult, knock yourself out, but you should talk to your doctor, not your HR department, about what you put in your body. Well, that was a controversial enough statement, even though it seemed pretty logical to me, that I all of a sudden was on Fox News and Glenn Beck and all the usual suspects just talking about freedom in the workplace and how important it is to allow people to be free. And anyway, lo and behold, all of a sudden I'm starting RedBalloon, and I did that only because it was part of my story. And that's sometimes how entrepreneurs work. That's sometimes how the Lord works through people, is simply you are trying to solve a problem that is a problem for you, that's right in front of you. And lo and behold, it's a problem that a lot of other people have, and ta-da, you have a new business.
I want to go back to something you mentioned a minute ago with your board about how your company was doing fine, your revenues were fine, like you were hitting all the metrics of success. Their issue was purely an ideological one. They weren't pointing to the fact that, because you said you like Jesus, we're losing 5% here or 7% there, right?
Right.
And it reminds me, the Army sent me in, what was it? It was 2017. They sent me on a fellowship to Georgetown University to do a master's in public relations and corporate communication, and it was a great experience. I mean, the Army will pay you to go to grad school for a year and a half. It's a great deal. Highly recommend. But one of the things that I kept getting in that program over and over and over again was reading all these reports about how if you're a business and you don't go hardcore left wing, like there's no hope for you, because all the data shows millennials will only buy from activist organizations, and they'll only buy from companies that, have the "in this house" signs in their front window. And, we're recording right now at the height of the Cracker Barrel situation, right?
Yes.
And I'm looking around at all the companies, what happened to Bud Light, what's happening to Jaguar, Target, right? All these companies that are suddenly finding out that the siren song of millennials will only buy from Bolsheviks, it seems like that was just a big propaganda line from the get-go.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely spot on, and this is part of the reason also, and I won't wax too eloquent on this, but part of the reason as I got into RedBalloon, I realized, this is actually kind of an important business that we're getting into, because if you read Sun Tzu's The Art of War, talks about quite a bit. One of the things you want to focus on when you're going after a target is you want a target that is both feasible and strategic. So feasible and strategic. So New York City is super strategic, not very feasible. Little Beauville, Idaho, which, wonderful little town, but it is very feasible, not very strategic. So how do you find targets that are both feasible and strategic? And if you look at, CNN or Harvard University, you think, man, those are strategic, but they're not very feasible. They don't really have, it would take an enormous amount of effort to turn them around. It'd probably be better to just start from scratch. Whereas the workplace and corporate America, I felt was both strategic and feasible. And I say that because there's lots of capitalists still there, right? And you see people turn on a dime. They were going along to getting along. They thought, man, if I just will, do this left-leaning propaganda, then I will get all the customers I want. They thought that they believed that propaganda, as you said it, whether it's Cracker Barrel or any of these places. And so they just believed it. They went along to get along. They were not doing it because they had a deep ideological conviction in the same way that CNN or Harvard University might. And so it feels way more feasible to be able to get in front of those people and make a difference. And we've seen that with Bud Light, with Target, with Cracker Barrel, right? But then, okay, is it really strategic? And I would say, back to the earlier conversation, a job is such an important factor in a person's life. And if you have the right job with the right company where you're not going through the liturgy of DEI training all the time, but instead you're allowed to work hard, support your family, be a clear thinking person, then you are going to be in a better spot. And I know this partly because at RedBalloon, I've received thousands of thank you notes from perfect strangers who have told me things like, you saved my marriage because of the job that my husband got, or you saved my marriage because of the job that I got. Or I had a single mom write me and say, I got a new job through RedBalloon, grateful, wonderful. 3 weeks into the job, one of my boys says to me, Mommy, you're not angry anymore. She's like, oh man, I was angry, Mommy. I feel terrible about that. But she's like, but I didn't realize what an impact my job was having on my worldview and every relationship in my life. There was another gal that we placed at a job, actually at a construction company, and she was coming out of Morgan Stanley of all places. And she called like 3 weeks in. She's like, I feel like I've gone through detox. All of a sudden I can think clearly about the world because I don't have this worldview, this oppressive worldview pushed down my throat every single day in the workplace. So anyway, that's a long way of saying I think the workplace is both strategic and feasible, and a lot of these left-leaning woke tards, I'll call them, who are pushing this agenda on all these corporations. The mask has been ripped off. They don't actually have any substance to what they were pushing on, and now we know that the people who are still capitalists inside those corporations are actually willing to go back to the right and get back to what made their business great in the first place.
It was such a weird thing for me those last few years. Like I remember the first time I really encountered kind of the corporate wokeness, if you will. I was on an Alaska Airlines flight, but
Yeah.
back back when it was a good airline before they acquired Virgin. Um, and I'm looking at the in-flight magazine and I'm reading the CEO's note, and he is just harping on how great it is that they're doing all this DEI training and all this work that he's doing to bring all this into the airline. And of course now they've got a lawsuit that First Liberty Institute is going against them with on some of the outcomes of that. And it got to the point where Washington D.C. again, I'm at Georgetown, and I moved there from Alaska. I did 6 years in Alaska. It was great. Highly recommend everyone just move to Alaska. Great state. And it felt like I couldn't get a hamburger without there being some kind of virtue signal somewhere, right, in the messaging. Even a couple of years ago, like I couldn't get a ticket on an airplane without it in some way, funding the opposition, if you will.
Right.
And I know that's something that I've heard you talk about on other interviews that you've done is the importance of Christians building business community and not just happily ceding the corporate space and the business space and the financial space to those who are completely against, all godly value. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that plays into your philosophy of what you're doing and what you're building?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we live in a world where people talk about neutrality. They want neutrality at some level. And I would argue that nothing is neutral. You're either going right or you're going left. You're either growing or you're declining. Things aren't static. That's just not how God built the world. You look at a plant, it's either growing or it's dead. And I think that people don't realize how much of an impact that kind of worldview and just reality is impacting every other part of their life. And so, I have an iPhone, so yes, I am, funding the evil empire of Apple. But when Christians and conservatives take the time and energy to make a decision to go a different direction, to try and support a local business or a Christian-owned or a conservative-owned business, they are supporting a business that is going to have their back if things go badly again in the future. So it's not just a philosophical decision that you're making, although it is somewhat that. It is also a safety decision. It is, if I'll just pick on me. If you help support RedBalloon, if you, as an employer, use us for job searches, if you're a job seeker and you're on RedBalloon rather than Indeed or ZipRecruiter, if there's another COVID-style pandemic that's out there, RedBalloon is going to be that much stronger because you made the decision to support this business, and we will not compromise on who we are at that moment. And Indeed and ZipRecruiter will happily jump to the left as quickly as they can if that kind of incident happens again. And I'm talking about job search because that's what RedBalloon does. But you think about all the different categories, whether it's Public Square or Good Ranchers or Patriot Mobile or Pure Talk, or all the different businesses out there that are providing a Christian and conservative alternative, whose profits are going to support your worldview, whose revenues are generating positive jobs, positive experiences for employees of those businesses. When you're investing in those businesses, you're protecting yourself. You're protecting yourself for the future, where now you are in a spot where those businesses are strong and vibrant, such that if something comes down the pipe, they're going to have your back. Whereas you're like, well, I'm going to go use AT&T anyway. I know it costs more, but it's such a pain in the neck to change to Pure Talk or Patriot Mobile or one of these other providers. Well, you just need to be aware of the decision you're making. It's not just, and you need to make clear economic decisions, right? If the Christian conservative alternative is twice the price and half the value, then honestly, we need Schumpeter's, creative destruction to take that business out and have them go out of business. Even if they have a great worldview, you still need to be good at business, right? So I'm not proposing that you go buy the worst product just because they have a fish sticker somewhere on their window. What I'm proposing is that you put in the time and energy to research it and be in a position where you're supporting those businesses, because it is a safety mechanism. It's a safety mechanism for you and for your family, because now you're going to have a whole ecosystem, a whole economy that is protecting and kind of going to have your back if you need them in the future. So that's how I want people to think about business. And then I want people to go out and start a bunch of businesses. I want Christians who, if you understand that God is the creator of heaven and earth, you should be the type of person who wants to go out there and create things yourself and be a mini creator and create businesses that create jobs and economic prosperity for your community. But that may be a topic for another day.
Well, and I just love that. I mean, that's a concept that I didn't necessarily grow up with. I mean, I grew up with the idea of there are all these businesses out there, and then of course you have the church, and it seems like the people you go to church with are typically separate from the people that you go shopping with. But I've even done some reading about like even Amish communities, and you probably know the statistic better than I do, but I think I've heard it said that every dollar spent in the Amish community circulates 7 times within before it leaves. And when I heard that, I was so challenged, and I thought, how amazing would that be if we could say the same about, the church, about like where I live up in Leavenworth County, Kansas. If a dollar circulated 7 times through the Christian-owned businesses before it left, and how they could bless each other, how they could bless the church, how they could fund missions, how they could do philanthropy. I think Christians have for a long time, at least in my lifetime, we've been content to kind of walk away from some of the aspects of the stewardship mandate and let others kind of pick that up and say, well, hey, their airplanes are shiny, so we're happy to fly on theirs rather than build our own,
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that is, and I've also heard people say, well, I work for a big company, therefore I'm just plundering the Egyptians. And I would say, no, you're not plundering the Egyptians. I appreciate you thinking that and referencing the Bible. But the reality is that they are making more money on your labor than they are paying you. And if they're not, they should fire you, because that's actually how employment works. The company should make more money from your labor than they are paying you, and that's how they turn a profit. And the sons of this world are wiser than the sons of righteousness sometimes. And you're not plundering the Egyptians. They're making money on you. And because, when the Israelites were plundering the Egyptians, they were taking their stuff and then they were leaving and going out into the wilderness. And nobody seems to talk about that second part of the plundering of the Egyptians story. It's not always just, kittens and roses and super easy, and we're just going to plunder the Egyptians and then stay. We're going to plunder the Egyptians and then go do something really hard. We're going to go out in the wilderness. We're going to have to trust God at a totally different level. And that's the second half of that story. So, if you're at a big business, like, look, you want to be supporting your family. You want to be doing great things. And you can be super faithful inside of that business and be in a spot where people know what you believe. And you'd be surprised how that's going to generate courage. And, we talked about that in the very beginning, is when you are courageous, you're going to give courage to other people around you. And so we need to be starting businesses, but if you're not starting businesses, make sure you're being courageous inside the business that you're already in, because you'd be surprised how many people actually agree with you. There was a couple years ago, RedBalloon decided to run a campaign around June is coming out conservative month. And we thought that'd be funny. And so we actually told people some specific things like come out conservative. So when someone asks you how your weekend was, don't be afraid to say, I went to church with my family and I loved it. And it's interesting. I heard it got these notes from people saying, I did that and it terrified me, because I'm like, oh man, now they're going to know who I am. I'm outed and da da da. And many people are like, and then I found out that like 80% of the people inside my business agreed with me and also went to church on Sunday, but everybody was self-censoring because they were so afraid that they would, be mocked by the 3 woke employees inside that business. And so that's just my encouragement, is whether you're starting a business, and if you're not geared to start a business, live your values out loud. And I mean, that's the whole point of this podcast, living your values out loud, being courageous. And if you do that, you are going to give courage to all the people around you. And if you start a business and you're living out your values in your business, my encouragement is to consumers, go to that business, be an encouragement to that business. Because when you go and spend money at Good Ranchers rather than going to some random meat producer that you've never heard of, that's some national brand, you are giving them courage because they're saying, look, there's other people that have my back, and I'm going to turn around and have their back in the future. So sorry, I could talk about this all day, but we should, anyway, there you go.
No, man, no, we could talk this all day. Lori and I keep talking about one day we just want to come out there just so we can like plunder the Canon Plus store. And
Yeah,
like
that'd be great. We'd
if
love to have
if
you.
that ever happens, I need 3 hours on your calendar for an extended coffee because this
there you
is stuff I'm very passionate about. I'm kind of curious. When you're a young man, you're out there in Silicon Valley. Speaking of a place where most people do not come out and talk about, oh, I went to church on the weekend. What? How did you hold fast to who you are as a Christian man? I mean, that there had to be some trials in there.
Yeah, there were. The company that I worked for, there were a number of Christians there. And I'll be honest, like when you have a last name of Crapuchettes, like what are you gonna do? Mock me for my you grow up with this very thick skin, and so it's never really bothered me what other people thought of me or they wanted to tell me. I'm like, oh, whatever. Like, what are you gonna do? Mock my last name? In fact, there's a whole Reddit thread where I think there's like thousands of these left-leaning people who think they're the first person ever to realize there's multiple swear words in my last name, and they're like, look, oh, and they're like, and they're trying to blow me up. I'm like, okay, I don't really care. It's all been said before. Anyway, so I think there was that. The second thing, and this is this is how God builds you up. This is how people are built. I went to a church in San Francisco. We went to Chuck McElhaney's OPC church. Chuck was a faithful pastor who spoke out against homosexuality in the city of San Francisco. And it was a rare Sunday that we didn't have to fight through picket lines to get to church on Sunday morning. And that also shapes you as a person, right? When you go to battle, like, and then you get to the workplace and you're like, if I say this thing, that person might sneer at me. Like, okay, like play out the worst case scenario. If you do this thing, if you stand up, if you're faithful, what will happen? Like, because often people just like have this unspoken, it's going to be terrible, it's going to be miserable. Okay, well, actually play that scenario out. What are they actually going to do? Are they going to make fun of you? Are they going to run off to the HR department and tell on you? Like, what are they going to do? Maybe you lose your job. Well, you probably could find another job, right? It's just, if you run the scenario out, it's actually just not that bad. So growing up in the Bay Area, I had the the dual threat of a church that stood up for everything, and so I'm like, that's what I want to be like. And then I had this horrible last name that made it so I had extremely thick skin.
So I'm kind of curious from there going on, like you go from California to Idaho, and
Yeah.
I know I've heard a lot of stories about why a lot of people are moving out there, and the vibe that I get looks pretty impressive. I've heard an argument about, or maybe I should say a debate about, as the nation has the last few years gone so far from its founding values to the point that it views Christianity, which had a very large impact on the founding of the nation. I don't think anyone who's studied would disagree with that, to the point where the nation and society and culture in general are hostile to it. And so there's been this argument I've seen of like, should Christians start trying to congregate in certain areas to build up community, to build reservoirs of courage, to build, oases, if you will, versus should we all just stay, where we are and do the best where we can? And I'm kind of curious what your thoughts would be on that.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And, obviously you need to adapt this to what's the right thing for you and your family. I know that it has been an incredible blessing for, I have 5 kids, to be able to raise all 5 kids here in this community where there's peer pressure in all the right ways, right? In every scenario, no matter where you are, there's always peer pressure. And this is part of the reason I think it's important for RedBalloon to help place people in pro-freedom businesses, because when you're around clear-thinking conservatives, there's a high probability that you are going to be a clear-thinking conservative. I heard one stat, I don't know if I totally believe it, but they said your personality is the sum total of your 8 closest relationships. I think that's probably an exaggeration, but I think there is some truth in it. When you hang out with people who disagree violently with your worldview, then you are going to have your worldview eroded, unless you are a very unique, extremely stalwart person. So my kids, we've got 5 kids, and they are all faithful. My youngest is 13. They are crushing it. Lord willing, they're going to be world changers and culture shapers. And we live in a community where that is more of the norm. And so I would say you need to look at what is the most important job that you have as parents. And if it's to raise faithful kids, then you need to make sure that they're hanging out with other faithful kids, because there's a higher probability that they are going to go on the right track in that scenario. And if you've got them at the government school system, at the public school system, they're hanging out with non-Christians all day long who are pushing a different worldview. And you say, well, they're not really pushing a worldview. They absolutely are pushing a worldview. We're all pushing a worldview in what we believe. It's how we talk about things. Is sports more important than music? Is music more important than sports? That's part of your worldview. And what you prioritize as a family, as an individual, is just an outworking of that worldview. And so as a father, or as a wife, or a husband, and a mother, you need to be in a position where you're saying, where are my kids going to thrive and go and change the world? Because having a bunch of kids is fantastic. I'm a big fan of big families. But if you have a bunch of kids and then you lose them to the world, if they go off to college and lose their faith, it sounds harsh, it'd almost be better to not have those kids. So if the most important thing is faithful children who are going to build the culture and spread the gospel after you, then I would argue that being around other Christians where you have kids that are growing up in that environment is probably one of the top priorities.
Yeah, we are definitely really grateful to have a really solid church here. And that's something, being in the military, you move around every few years, and I didn't take it, I didn't think about it as hard as I should have early on. It was just like, hey, any church will do. And and that's been one thing that's really mattered to me and my wife in the last few years, as we've matured a bit more in the faith and not had to move as much, realizing, man, there really is something to be said, not just for finding a church or a church community, but in finding a good one, one that's really into the word, one that's very stalwart. And man, I mean, you go back and say 2020 is what opened your eyes. 2020 is what really opened my eyes to that as well. It was just absolutely amazing to behold. I think we all kind of had the blinders taken off that year. It
was definitely, and there was a lot of silver linings to COVID, right? And it was a great opener of eyes, and a lot of people, a great revealer of secrets. The number of people that have pulled their kids out of public school because of COVID, it's like, well, okay, the Lord used COVID to change a lot of people, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it changed the trajectory of my career. I'd planned on staying 30 years in the Army, and I feel very confident that I had a path to eventually being a full colonel, which in the public affairs realm, that's your ceiling. We don't get made into generals, but about once every decade, and that's just for a couple of years. One of them will be allowed that. But 2020, all of a sudden I saw, like, my job, I was a military spokesman, and all of a sudden I saw, holy cow, like, we are not even the least bit concerned about dealing in truth anymore. I saw my career field jump in the propaganda head first. And I was like, I know Christians are called to serve in Babylon. I know Daniel served in Nebuchadnezzar's court, and it was ordained by God for him to do so. But I don't see that Christians are supposed to be the spokesman and the public apologist for pure evil. And that was a major turning point, and a big reason why hearing you on Aaron's show is an encouragement to me, as I was making the decision that I'm going to be leaving the Army in the next year and a half or so, what do I do to see, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one out here who thinks this way in the vocational realm. And that was just huge for me. And man, y'all have like covered some ground really fast. I mean, I was looking on the site just yesterday for fun. And I mean, some of the partners you have include places like Hillsdale College, the Tucker Carlson Network, Moms for America, even the Herzog Foundation here where I'm sitting. I mean, you guys have like assembled quite a coalition in a short order.
Well, and I actually think that's an interesting business concept, even beyond the, kind of worldview discussion that we've been in. It's very easy in business to feel this draw towards neutrality. And as I said earlier, there is no neutrality, but to a center position. And I've got some really good friends who have done very well in business who are like, if you could make RedBalloon, more of a taupe balloon, let's not get so excited about how extravagant you have to be and right leaning. And I'm like, no, you need to actually stand up for what you believe. And if you do that, it actually turns out to be a great business principle. There's so many business books talking about when you're starting a business, you want to niche down, you want to focus on a very specific market, you want to be kind of put on blinders when it talks about all the other markets out there. And that's really important. Well, that wasn't what was driving. It's not like I had this, huge business insight when I started RedBalloon, but it really was just like, I need to be faithful. I need to toe the line because other people aren't doing that. I need to say the things that other people don't want to say, especially on places like LinkedIn or Instagram or, these places. I've gotten kicked off LinkedIn several times, but we always get back. It's fine. But I need to just say those things and I need to hold the line. And what it ended up being is really good for business, right? RedBalloon has almost 5,000 businesses that we're working with at this point. And we've had almost 2 million job seekers interact with the site. So we are way bigger than we should be for a 4-year-old business. And I think the reason for that is A, God's blessing, but B, we actually just lived our values out loud. We weren't afraid. And that made us a rallying point for a lot of these people. And if we had tried to be careful or, nuanced in our language, I think we would have just ended up being another boring job board out there and nobody would have found us and probably we'd already be gone. So if you're thinking about a business out there, if you run a business, my encouragement is, find your spine in the way that you talk about your business and you talk about your worldview in your business. And it actually can be a very positive thing. And I'll give one quick example on this. There's a plumber here in Moscow, Idaho, not connected with the church. He's just a dude, Tim McCoy. And he decided one day about a year ago to put up a Christ is Lord flag in his window. He just thought, this is what I believe. I'm just going to put it up in the window. And I asked him, I was like, why'd you do that? He says, I don't know. I just thought I should do it. He says, but here's what's interesting. I said, did you lose customers? He says, yes, I absolutely lost customers. People came in very angry that I was doing that. But he says, but they were the most painful customers to work with anyway. And I've gained a ton more customers because people love someone with courage who is willing to say, this is what I believe. Here I stand. And he says, and not all those people believed the same thing as him. But the fact that he was willing to make a stand for something that he believed is attractive to people. Even if they don't agree with you, it is very, very attractive. So I chalk a lot of RedBalloon success up to that as we lived our values out loud. We were unapologetic. And that is actually a way to be successful in business, in addition to being the right thing to do.
Yeah, I know a couple of business owners up in the county that I live in who've told me similar stories that, they increasingly over time, they got bolder and they were willing to be open about the fact that, yeah, we're Christians and we believe this way. And a bit trepidatious at first. And then they took a step and they found, I'm not losing business, I'm gaining it. And their businesses are thriving now. One of them's a car repair business, and I love them, and I hardly take my cars there anymore because there's such a long wait to get in.
Exactly.
They're just so successful, and I'm thrilled for them. I mean, I just way to go. Way to go. Live it out. Don't hide. I think people are looking for that, especially after the last few years of all this kind of just fake window dressing that we've seen from the corporate scene. And you guys have done amazing stuff. I know it has not come without criticism. I know there's this hit piece that Wired did on you guys called Meet the Anti-Woke Job Board for Christian Nationalists.
Yes.
Which I just think if you don't have at least one hit piece, you're not doing your job or not trying hard enough.
That's right. That's right. In fact, I think my favorite hit piece, and we've had a lot, was there was a newspaper in South Carolina that said, if you use Red Balloon, you're a threat to society and should be forced to wear a yellow armband to make sure that people stay away from you. Like, wow, have you not even read history? Like, it was just like so on the nose. I'm like, wow, that is terrible. And the nice part is, I've got a lot of people in the Jewish community who are big fans of Red Balloon, and they're like, you're our people. Yeah. So, again, those hit pieces are great PR. I'll be honest, I've done at least a couple interviews with CNN and MSNBC. They don't like me. And they make fun of me, but you'd be surprised. There are conservatives that are accidentally still listening to CNN, and we get great customers from that. So, like, I don't mind a fight. I don't mind the hit pieces. But yes, if you are over the target, you're going to get a bunch of flack. And if you're not over the target, no one's going to be shooting at you. So if no one's shooting at you, you might not be doing as much as you think you are.
Oh, completely agreed. I mean, I'm just to the point now of saying if you're not being attacked by the left wing, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
if you're not being challenged, what are you doing? I think there's a statement that says you choose to do nothing, therefore you choose to be nothing. And
Right.
that is certainly not the attitude that you guys are taking it out to war with you, and I love it. As we kind of start wrapping up here, I'm kind of wondering what's next for you guys. What can you share? What's coming around the bend?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so one of the things that I've been top of mind for me in the Red Balloon story is that we're in a cultural moment, whether it was COVID or whether it was the DEI woke movement, where people are willing to jump to a brand that is courageous, but long term, you still have to be really excellent, because what happens is these businesses, I talked about, you want to work with businesses that are like-minded, but you don't want to work with businesses who are like-minded but just have a terrible product that's overpriced. And so we have been really striving for using every ounce of energy while this movement is happening to build excellent products that are world-changing in the process. Because I want left-leaning businesses to come to me and say, hey, is it okay if I'm able to work with Red Balloon because you have the best products? And I don't want to, and this has been done by the right for so long. Salesforce canceled ADF when Roe versus Wade went down. ADF was paying them $4 million a year, and Salesforce is like, yeah, we're not going to work with you anymore. And the real question is like, why does ADF pay $4 million a year to Salesforce, who hates their worldview, hates what they're doing, right? So, but that's a side note. And now ADF's off Salesforce. It's great. But we want to create the best products out there. And so what we're focusing on at Red Balloon right now is how do we have just excellent products, excellent software. So we now do a recruiting service. And I don't know if you've ever, if you're listening and you've used a recruiter before, you're used to paying $20,000 to $50,000 to $60,000 to have that recruiter help you hire someone. And we do this flat rate recruiting for $9,000. We do that because we're at scale and we use technology to make our recruiters effective and efficient. So we're a tech-enabled recruiting company, and so it allows us to do it for way less, and we're going to bring you values-aligned talent. So that's really cool, because if you're a business and you hire a bad person, if you make a bad hire, it's going to cost you at least $10,000, sometimes way, way, way more than that. I've talked to business owners who lost their business because of a bad hire. So we have that, and that's kind of like a market innovation. But it also, everyone, even if you're not in lockstep with our worldview, that a cultural fit hire is way better than someone who doesn't want to work hard, doesn't believe the capitalism is good, doesn't like the Constitution. And so we're getting a lot of businesses who don't totally agree with Red Balloon who are excited about Red Balloon. So that's the first thing. Then we're building software that uses AI effectively, but also has at its core that hiring is a distinctly human activity. And so we have built some really interesting tech to allow people to actually be human in the hiring process. Because right now there's this kind of AI war that's going on where job seekers are using robo-apply or AI apply to apply to hundreds of jobs. And so employers are responding with ATSs that block everybody out right away. And so what we're doing is we're changing the kind of the landscape of hiring through excellence. And part of that is we just understand that people are made in the image of God, and therefore they should be treated differently. And by doing that, we're creating some really interesting software that businesses are saving tons of money, getting better hires, and just having a delightful experience in the process. So we are doing all those things. We acquired militaryhire.com last month. We're integrating them into our tech stack. And really, at the end of the day, HR tech is one of the most liberal industries in the world. And we want to redeem the world of work. And we want to take on HR tech and build $1 billion business in the process by the grace of God. So that's where we're planning to go, hopefully.
Man, that's a big mountain to conquer. I would love to see you guys flip the world of HR. What a
Yeah.
what a coup that would be.
Yeah, no, but it's so important, right? Because they're these gatekeepers of not only do people get jobs, but the culture of a business. And I've had HR leaders at businesses I've run who actually had an aligned worldview and were such an asset to the business. I've also worked with HR leaders who were not an asset to the business, but instead had their little fiefdom, and they were fighting to push a worldview. And shoot, if we can redeem the world of work and make HR a better place, it will have a huge impact on our whole country and on the quality of life for every American.
Well, as we kind of get into our last few questions here, one thing I definitely want to get your insight on is like if you're sitting in a room of business owners through this podcast, people who are aligned with us in terms of faith, in terms of worldview, but by gum, they're just still scared. Like, what would you say to them?
Oh, I'd say find your spine and listen to this podcast. Let's start with that. Yeah, that's it. There's my answer. Find your spine, listen to the podcast. No, I mean, you need to surround yourself with people who have a spine, because and so, go join a C12 group, go join a convene group, go find other like-minded business leaders who have done courageous things and hang out with them. Go have coffee with them, go have lunch with them, because you can read books, and I read a lot of business books. You can listen to podcasts, and I listen to great business podcasts like Find Your Spine. But having one-on-one relationships with other people who have stood up, been courageous, been successful, you can't replace that. And so that would be my encouragement, is go find someone who's courageous, and buy them lunch, buy them coffee, buy them a beer, and just glean information from them. And that's going to help kind of, be a building up for you, so that you know that you have the courage to go do the right thing.
Yeah, it's something that is so accelerated when we do it in community, and I know you've got a great community out there for it. Andrew, I'm kind of curious, is there anything I missed, anything else that you'd like to share, man? You're just such an accomplished leader, and you've done so much, and I know you've been a huge inspiration to me. Is there anything I missed?
I would just encourage people, it is very easy, if you read the news, if you look at the world around you, to kind of feel like, man, I am just overwhelmed. I'm, wringing my hands. I'm concerned. Like, what am I going to do? What's going on in Ukraine and Taiwan and the Mexico border, or elections. And it can be overwhelming, and you can feel like, but what can I do? I'm just one person. And the disciples were like that. They were just fishermen, or, blue collar dudes. And Jesus is like, those are the people I'm going to use to change the world. So my encouragement to you is, do one thing different today, and then do one thing different tomorrow that's going to support your business community, that is going to support your Christian community, that is going to encourage other people, that is bold, that is brave. You don't have to change everything about your life all in one moment, but get off the couch and stop watching Fox News and worrying about the world, and go do stuff and do positive things for other people. And if all of us did one positive thing that built the Christian community and built the Christian kind of business ecosystem, man, things would change in a hot minute. So that's my encouragement, is go do that, and everything will be fine. It'll be great.
Love it, man. You get off the couch, stop making sure cable news works. I assure you it still will without you being there.
That's exactly it.
Man, wise words from Andrew Crapuchettes. Quick question for you. Where should people follow you, RedBalloon? Like, how can they tune in and catch the vision here?
Yeah, so redballoon.work. It's not .com because we thought .com sounded too much like communism, and we don't want communism. We want work. So it's redballoon.work. And there's a lot of great resources. If you're a job seeker, you can fill out a profile. Even if you're not looking for a job today, you can fill out a profile, and then employers can find you. And maybe you want to have a conversation with a pro-freedom employer. It's all free for job seekers. If you're an employer, you know the cost of a bad hire. We are going to save you an enormous amount of money. We're going to give you a peace of mind. We've done it for a lot of other employers, and we'd love to do it for you. So redballoon.work, great resources there. The last thing I'd say is follow me on LinkedIn. I try and put a meaningful piece of content on there every single day that is either entertaining or helpful, and sometimes both. So if you go and find me, there are not a lot of Andrew Crapuchettes out there, and so you'll find me pretty easily. But I'd love you to follow me on LinkedIn, engage with the content, and that's where you're going to find your people. So go to RedBalloon, follow me on LinkedIn, and be a blessing to people in your community today, and everything will be just fine.
I've got to ask, this just came to me on the website, at least the early version of the website that I immediately went to after I heard about you on Aaron's show. It had the game. Is the game still there?
I don't know that we are still running the game. It was what was that? It was like the vaccine landmine game or something like that.
Yeah, it was like running the woke gauntlet game.
Yeah, running the woke gauntlet game. I don't know. It might be somewhere. I haven't even thought about that in a while. But yeah, we built a video game to make fun of people who are trying to avoid vaccine and DEI and HR and everything. So yeah, if you do, maybe you can find it. It's worth the effort if you can.
Good deal. And last question, I've got to ask this. This show is all about courage. Who's a brave person you know you'd like to highlight?
Man, there are so many. Pastor Doug Wilson, who I go to his church, that is a man who has taken more flack for sticking with the scripture than anybody I know. Pastor Chuck McElhaney, who was down in San Francisco. But I'll give the nod to Doug Wilson. He's just been a wonderful mentor and pastor and faithful man for many, many years. So I'll give him the nod.
I enjoy a lot of his content as well. As a matter of fact, he's on my target list. I don't know how to reach him, but one day I'm going to figure out how. So
there you go.
Well, I appreciate it so much, Andrew. Like I said, you've been a huge encouragement to me over the years, and just so on a personal level, thank you for that. And thank you so much for taking the time. I know you've done way, way bigger stages than this, so I don't take for granted that your time is extraordinarily valuable, and you shared some with us, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, and I hope everybody enjoyed this, and God bless. This has been fun.
God bless you too, buddy. I'm coming to you from the Herzog Foundation Studios in Smithville, Missouri. You should totally check out the Herzog Foundation. They're doing amazing work to catalyze Christian education nationwide. You can learn more at herzogfoundation.com. You can also learn more about me and my other work at chasespears.com. Here on this show, the intent is to bring you stories and principles of courage. You've heard it. Now it's up to you to get out there and find your spine. I'm Chase Spears. Thanks for listening.
Remember to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on Finding Your Spine.